moderator, Dr. Suzy Green, who I've heard speak at many of these conferences and always so well received. And we've got, as the panel, Kate Daley, Mark Deady, and Cassandra Szoeke. So please welcome them to the stage. Thank you.
New friends.
Well, hello everyone. How's everyone feeling? Good? Energised from the morning? Fantastic. It's so wonderful to be here in person. I think I was at the Happiness Conference recently and it just is so much, I think, better to be here in person. So thanks for joining me on the panel today. It's on a topic that I spend most of my life talking about, the power of a mentally healthy workplace, and in particular how leaders can drive cultural change. So we have Kate with us, who's come all the way from the UK, which I was thinking you were zooming in, but it's great to have you here in person. Cassandra's come from Victoria, Melbourne. Allan, you're from Darwin, I hear. That's right. And Mark, you're here, Sydney-based.
Just down the road.
Yeah, just down the road. Fantastic. So in the book, and I'm sure many of you in the audience will be familiar with the Gallup book by Jim Clifton called It's the Manager. It's a great book if you haven't read it. It really highlights the key role of the manager or the leader in creating cultural change and organisational success. And I would also argue in creating a psychologically healthy and safe workplace. We also know from the research that the positive energy, and this is wonderful research from Professor Kim Cameron, Centre for Positive Organisations, University of Michigan, Ross School of Business, that this positive energy is contagious, and I think most of us know that. On the flip side, we hear of the energy vampires, don't we? But there's increasingly research to show that there's positive energy that's contagious, and it affects the leaders' team members, but Kim's research shows even back to their families. And I think, again, we all know this, but it's great that the research is catching up. So I'm going to start with you, Mark, because I know you spend a lot of time working with leaders. In your experience, what's required of leaders to ensure, I guess, both performance and well-being for individuals and teams and organisations?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that performance and well-being kind of go hand in hand. We know that consistently that people are feeling better, they're more productive, and vice versa. In terms of what's required at sort of a managerial level, I think, well, first and foremost, we know that, as you said, that direct manager is so influential when it comes to an individual's well-being, and we know that having a supportive manager really dramatically changes your well-being in the workplace. There's very direct links there, and in terms of what supportive looks like, I guess it can be, I mean, any number of things, but I think ultimately it's making individuals feel valued as employees, and there's a lot of aspects to that. I think being available and accessible, involving employees in decision making, being appreciative of positive work, and responding where appropriate to concerns, and like I said, keeping employees linked in. Really, I think it kind of comes down to that genuine care and having employees feel valued. It's
genuine, isn't it? And I know for some of the leaders we work with, they might reflect and say, it doesn't feel like me. It's not something I would normally do. And particularly through COVID, I've heard some say they've really struggled with that. Absolutely, to come across quite sincere. Yeah. And I guess you cover that in some of the training that you do with managers. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think the big thing, like you mentioned, COVID has changed a lot of that. And one of the big things is that, you're not, it has to be checking in on employees and having one-on-one, having sessions with there's less of a presence. Well, certainly during the lockdown of managers and feeling that support, and I think that's a critical thing that we've missed a bit. And I think it has to be more of a conscious effort when it comes to those leadership roles to maintain those connections and connect in that way. And absolutely, it's a kind of core component of what individuals need to do to prevent, I suppose, is multiple aspects when it comes to manager and mental health training. But one of the big things is doing all the work to prevent poor mental health and as I discussed earlier, that idea of risk and minimising risk, but also, I guess, responding where where they have concerns to individuals, and I think those are the kind of the two connected parts.
Yeah, fantastic. And Kate, I know you do a lot of work with leaders and managers as well, and love to hear more about your approach. And I guess for me, it's really about equipping them with key psychological capabilities that I usually argue people haven't learnt unless they've, derailed and gone off to see the psychologist for treatment, or unless they've been fortunate enough to work with perhaps a coach if they're an elite sports or an executive coach. But what about some of the work that you do? What would you say?
Yeah, I think just talking to that about managers are faced with such a lot at the moment. They always have been, but now it's almost like on top of that, by the way, you also need to focus on well-being, and they haven't necessarily got those skills. And I think it's really important that we therefore train managers and empower managers. So covering things like how to spot difficulties and how to have those supportive conversations with staff, but also how to think about the organisational risk factors. Are you giving clear communication, role clarity, the workload isn't too high? All of those factors, as well as kind of the individual ones, are really important. But I think also a key, when you were saying at the start about emotional contagion, which is a really weird term, but the idea is that if a manager is very stressed, they're going to pass that on to the team, and then the team also feels very stressed. And it's not that the manager should kind of hide that, because it's important that people are also authentic, and if they're struggling, like, that's okay to admit that. But if you are stressed as a manager, to also feeling empowered to get the support that you also need, I think is really, really valuable, so that you don't pass that on to your team and actually you pass on the good stuff instead.
So no pressure for leaders, really,
No
but a lot, because it's, as you said, working on their own well-being and being aware of the contagion effect, but also being aware of, particularly as we're about to get to this question around, I guess, increasing recognition of these international standards around psychological health and safety and the responsibility that they have for that too. Allan, any comments from you in regard to...
Yeah, I think for me, what we see in workplace accreditation, so White Ribbon Australia, we run a program across Australia, 150 growing organisations, 300,000 reach in terms of our employee network. What we say to managers is you need to lead with intent. You've got to have a purpose statement. We talk about in terms of primary prevention in the workplace, but we ask them to lead with intent no matter what you do.
So being really clear about what their intention is.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and then filtering that down and
Love
ensuring
that.
that shows up everywhere.
Yeah, it's a real, I guess, mindfulness-based approach, isn't it? And there's another great book that comes to mind for me, Crucial Conversations. Many of you will have read. It's been around for a long time. And the beginning of that process is start with heart. Before you even have a conversation, think about what is your intention, and really try to connect in from a heart-based approach. And Cassandra?
I was just going to add actually on exactly
Yeah.
that theme, which is, I know there's lots of skills we all don't have, but one thing we all have that's really powerful for your employees is care. And John led this morning talking about the
Absolutely.
care and performance yin and
Love
yang.
that.
And I'm going to oversimplify that and say, if you care for your employees, they will care for you. And you're representing your organisation, so they're going to care for their work if you care for them. And guaranteed, if you don't care for them, they won't care for you.
Yeah.
And someone can offer them more money, but one of the things is care is established in a relationship.
Absolutely.
So people will stay and reject more money if they feel cared for, and they'll also be more productive for you. So
True.
care's something we all get. And we shouldn't need to be trained in it, although I think thinking about it is all we have to do.
Absolutely. I think in the busyness of life, people can, and I know a lot of leaders we work with, become very task-focused and can forget or become mindless, perhaps, of not focusing in on the relationship. Some of Barb Fredrickson's work on positivity resonance and those micro moments of love. John asked, what is love this morning? It's really these micro moments of interaction that energise us. So I'm going to stick with you, Cassandra. We've increasingly been hearing about this move to personalised approaches, I know in medicine, but in psychology, and there was a paper that just came out, I sent you at 6 a.m. this morning, in positive psychology around this much more nuanced approach to individualised approaches. I know this is an area of your expertise. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So, no two employees are the same. And in fact, a single employee is not going to be the same on 2 different days. So I think this idea of personalised medicine and personalised care is just so important. And, you know, risking the ire of all the booths behind us, I don't know there's an app for that. So this is one of the issues.
That's the challenge now.
No, but really, I go back to showing care. And so one of our personalised approaches is often we get a program in, and you know that paper that you sent this morning, you know, which I did read, which is more reflective of me. I'm like, she was up at 6, why was I up? Reading her paper. You know, it really shows we've actually seen some negative effects when we implement organisational models because they're just delivered and there's no tailored approach to the business or the people within it, and that can actually have the reverse effect to what you want to have. Also, especially when we're dealing with mental health, and we should move over to here, you know, if you reveal things or bring things out, you've got to be ready to deal with the consequences of that, and many of these products or approaches don't.
Concern. Yep, absolutely.
And I'd love to speak to Kate on that.
Yeah, I know you do a lot of. I love all the digital approaches, and I know that's an area of your expertise.
Yeah, we were just talking about that paper, which I'm going to read after this because it sounds really good.
Sorry about that.
But the idea that there's, especially in digital, actually, I feel like it's almost the Wild West. Like there's so many apps, particularly in the last 2 years, like thousands and thousands for these apps. And not really evidence-based. Like they might have cognitive behaviour therapy in, so they count themselves as evidence-based, but actually they haven't evaluated what they're doing. And as a clinician, I just find that terrifying. And we're selling it. If you sell this into a health service, like we were saying, people know what to look for, so they know to look for that credibility and risk and clinical governance. But if you're selling into a bank that maybe hasn't had that mental health experience or that healthcare experience, you don't really know what you're looking for. So you're just swayed by this snazzy sales team. And I think, I'm desperate to read that paper because I think it's so important to make sure what we're doing is evidence-based. And in terms of personalisation, I think for digital, it's making sure you've got that spectrum. So you might have stuff at the reactive end, which is like your EAP systems, if people needed therapy, for example. But not everyone needs that. And actually, it's giving people the right treatment at the right time. And sometimes that might be something like self-help or something more preventative, proactive. So in terms of digital, just having that kind of broad suite that might be different companies or different approaches to use, and making sure you've got something for everyone, I think is really important.
It's going to be interesting, isn't it, as time goes on, to see these approaches come to the fore. I know we're quickly running out of time, but this is a really important, I think, topic, and unfortunately I was being mic'd up and couldn't hear Fiona's presentation, which I would have loved to have heard. We know that there's this shared responsibility between the organisation and individuals when it comes to workplace wellbeing, and with the ISO 45003 and the legislation in Victoria happening. Allan, I know that this is a particular area of interest for you, and you've been working with the Victorian Police Commission, or Commissioner, is that correct?
Absolutely, and I also want to add, I'll also read that paper. And the rest of us should also read that paper. We're really keen on this paper, but certainly yes. So we, White Ribbon Australia, of course, we work with the unusual allies, so to speak. And I think it's important to, if we're going to disrupt what it means to think about ending domestic violence, we have to think about what that means for the workplace. Domestic violence isn't a personal issue. It happens in workplaces too. And I recently was talking with Jobs Australia at their conference in Adelaide a few weeks ago around people, performance and practice. And it got me thinking that if we don't have practices and procedures in place that look at women's safety particularly, but safety in general, that takes a proactive and deliberate approach to domestic violence and responding not only to victims, but those who choose to perpetrate, we are always going to set our people up to not perform. Because domestic violence erodes the very fabric that holds together a sense of well-being and wellness in a workplace. So we are working alongside of a number of different organisations, but I wanted to talk predominantly about the 115 growing organisations that are joining us with workplace accreditation. Because workplace accreditation, simple way of putting it, it's like the heart tick of approval for a good food. It's about good workplace culture and practice. And organisations work with us for up to 4 years to understand what it takes to be a workplace that's supporting their employees to be successful, and to look at the issue of women's safety, particularly through the lens of primary prevention.
Yes.
And so my call out to the audience today, if you're listening, I'm going to be floating around with the black shirt on and the white ribbon. Find me. Talk to me about it if you dare, because we need to have all workplaces taking this as a deliberate action.
Absolutely. Now we're running very quickly out of time, and I know I have to stick to it, but Mark, any concluding comments on, I guess, the roles and responsibilities of the organisation? I mean, even recently I'm still hearing organisations getting confused between psychological safety and psychological health and safety. I think we've still got a way to go in people understanding that. Any final comments around that?
I think that's an important point. I think this is an area that's pretty new still to a lot of people, and there's a lot of confusion, and it can be overwhelming. And I think the key message I probably want to leave is to not let that be get in the way of actual practical and I mean, there's small things that can be done that have big effects, and we know that. So I think the core thing for me is, well, a few aspects, but certainly, for one, we also know managers are employees too. Like, let's not forget that. So I think, I think bringing things together, and I think events like this are great for that. But there's a number of initiatives out there now that help to do that, and I've been involved recently in the National Workplace Initiative, and that is also a sort of comprehensive base that does that quite well, I think.
Absolutely. I think it's the most exciting time to be working in my 20-year career, to be working in this field. So thank you. I wish we had more time. Lovely to meet you, Katie and Cassandra, Allan and Mark. Thanks. Please give them a round of applause. Thanks.